Hey, Member Vault, this is Toby Eunice with the Gypsy Kiss. Stick with me a couple of seconds, and we're going to talk about the clip that Christy and Mike showed on their program last night, and why you should pay attention. So there are a couple of caveats with this. Again, I'm going to try and keep this way under 15 minutes. But I want you to listen to both how Christy asked the question and how Forrest answers the question. And I'm going to do this, I'm going to make my commentary based on several things. Number one, the number of conversations I've had with Forrest. Number two, the number of times I've recorded Forrest in public. And number three, the thousands of hours that I've spent interviewing people as part of my career in making documentaries. And I've had the opportunity to interview a lot of interesting people from, executives in large corporations to Serbian generals, right? So, what I want to do is comment on it and kind of give you caution as to what you're hearing, both in terms of the questions asked and the responses. In my humble opinion, I would not have asked the questions in the way that they were asked. I wasn't there, so I didn't have control over that. And in my humble opinion, Forrest's best answer came in the first 30 seconds. And then after that, it was a bunch of smoke to avoid answering any questions at all. And here's why. If Forrest were to say to us, or in answer to anyone's question, when they ask, will I have any trouble owning it because of the type of land that it's on? That's a yes. First of all, that's a yes/no question. You're going to hear a lot of those kinds of questions. The second thing is he can't answer that question because if he answers the question, he reduces effectively the size of the problem. He changes the game. So let's say he were to tell you, well, I can assure you it's not on tribal land and it's not on private property. Well, none of us should be looking on either tribal land or private property. He can't say that because it changes the size of the problem. It reduces it effectively to public lands like the National Park lands, National Forest Service lands, Fish and Wildlife Service lands, all those lands that are Bureau of Land Management lands, Corps of Engineer, all those lands that are administered by the federal government, and in some cases the state government. That are administered on behalf of the public, you and me. We own those lands. That's why they are not private lands and they are not tribal lands. You and me, we don't own those lands. Private lands are owned by the landowners and tribal lands are owned by the tribes. We don't own those. The public lands we own and are administered by the federal government. Now, there are regulations that cover the manner in which they are administered that you have to deal with when you go on to Yellowstone National Park, right? Rules and regulations. But it's your land. And but he can't tell you it's on National Park Service or it's on public lands. He can't say that because he reduces the size of the problem. And I'm willing to bet that if you were to remove private lands, not that you shouldn't do this anyway, as I said, but if you were to remove private lands and tribal lands from the problem, you've reduced most of the land in the western states, right, in the Rocky Mountain states. So you've reduced it to those lands administered by either the federal government, which is the land for the most part, or the state government. He can't do that because he changes the size of the problem. He also can't tell you whether it's buried or not. I do not believe that it's buried because he adds a third dimension to the problem that really makes it difficult. So, but what I'd like you to do is kind of listen to the way the questions are asked. I'd like to give my opinion on how I would have asked him differently, and then we'll listen to his answers, and I'll tell you what I think he said. Okay, here we go. I'm going to switch over to a screenshot, and I'm going to start playing the video.
Well, so talking about when someone does find the treasure, it is there, the chest and the contents are theirs, correct?
So that's a question that, when answered, could be answered with a yes or no. Yes, it's theirs, or no. Forrest implies that there's complications. I don't believe there's complications. I believe that he made it as easy as possible for the finder to own the treasure, because he's not going to be here forever. And there's a very good possibility that the treasure will be found after he's departed this earth. But because the way the question was asked, and then there's a slight follow-up with a correct, it could have been answered yes or no. There's a variety of ways to ask this question, and it would have had to come out as a compound question. And the compound question was, when the finder finds your treasure, who owns it, is the way that you ask it. The correct answer at that point should have been the finder, but we don't get to that point. So he hems and haws, but he gives us somewhat of an answer.
They will own that treasure.
Okay, the second, yes or no. They will own that treasure. He could have easily said yes or no. Watch.
I said in my poem, I give you title to the gold.
Okay, that's the most honest thing that he said in this entire part of the conversation. In his poem, he says, I give you title to the gold, which, in my opinion, is what gives you the right to claim ownership of that treasure if you find it. He gives you title, and that would hold up in a court of law. That one sentence could be used to claim ownership of that property should anyone ever try to argue the point.
Okay.
But there are a lot of subchapter S's to that rule.
Okay, then he starts, here's the smoke screen. There are no subchapter S's to this rule. Subchapter S is a part of the IRS regulations that deals with establishing a corporation. Subchapter S happens to be the best way to get tax benefits out of it. You're not a corporation. The treasure chest is not a corporation. A corporation didn't hide the treasure chest, etc., etc. There are no subchapter S's. We start the smoke screen.
Too. But I don't want to go there.
Okay.
Of course, he doesn't want to go there because, and again, I'm not being critical of Forrest here, doesn't want to go there because there's no reason to go there. He gives the same bit of advice that he's given in the past.
Okay. What recommendation do you give to the finder? Do you think they should be public?
Okay, so again, we have the problem. The first part of that question, what recommendations do you give to the finder? Stop there, let him answer the question. Instead, we give him options to say yes or no. Do you think they should be public? No, etc., etc. So the question should have stopped at, what recommendations do you give to the finder?
Do you think they should remain anonymous?
I've said several times that if you find that treasure chest, put it under your bed and leave it there for 30 days without doing anything.
That's the second good bit of advice, right? Maybe not under your bed, but wait 30 days. Don't announce the finder. Contact a good tax attorney. Start talking with an attorney, because if you had won the lottery, you would do exactly the same thing.
There's a lot that you need to think about.
That's right. There is a great deal to be thought about, none of which have anything to do with a Chapter S corporation.
And there are a lot of things. I've spent a lot of time thinking about that.
Okay, when he does that, when he stops and he starts thinking again, he's going to be throwing some smoke at you. He spent a lot of time thinking about it, etc., etc. But there's nothing that he says in the next few seconds or lines that is going to be helpful to finding this treasure or learning any more about it.
I spent $5,000 with an attorney researching what happens if it's found on private property, Indian land, government land being Bureau of Reclamation, Corps of Engineers, BLM, National Park Service, Forest Service. There's 20 of those things, and every one of them has a different rule. So it's not that easy, but it's certainly doable. And that's why I say put it under your bed and leave it for 30 days, because you need to think about every one of those things.
You don't need to think about every one of those things. You only need to think about the one, type of property, who it is administered by, where the treasure was hidden. So you don't. There may be 20 of them, but the treasure is not hidden on 20 of them. It's only hidden on one. And again, the recommendation to wait 30 days before you do anything is a good recommendation.
Now, when you have thought about that, there has been a lot of media recently of transitions of land from, let's say, BLM to a different type of land. Did you consider that when you when you worked, so if the treasurer's on one type of land and it transitions to a different?
I don't want to go there.
Don't want to go.
He doesn't have to go there because all he would have to say is yes or no. Again, the way the question was asked, did you consider that? He could have said no, or he could have said yes. End of response. It isn't going to help you get any closer to finding that treasure. So there's a way to ask it, but you're giving him the opportunity by not asking the question more broadly. You're giving him the opportunity to get away from it. In this case, he does is I don't want to go there. He even refuses to answer it.
Okay. So the fine.
But let me.
Here's what's interesting is he refuses to answer it. And this is the third time he's done this in this conversation where he's avoided answering the question and then he does a follow-up. He's doing it again with this.
Make one comment. If you rent a cabin on private property in northern New Mexico, it's sitting out there by itself, you rent it. What are you renting? You're renting a place to sleep. But are you renting the backyard? Are you renting the front yard? Can you use the barbecue pit out there? And if you can use those things, then that's your property, isn't it, for 24 hours?
Okay, that last one was the best part of the smoke screen of all. Number one, property rental has nothing to do with where this treasure is hidden because it has nothing to do with property ownership. If you're renting a property, that means that property is owned by someone else. You can be renting it from the federal government, I guess, and call it public lands. But if you're, as he described it, if you're renting a cabin in northern New Mexico, and then he describes whether or not, of course, you're renting all the land. You can park your truck in the front yard. You can have the kids play in the backyard. You can use the barbecue, but you do not own that land any more than if you rent a car or a hotel room. Do you own that car or that hotel room? It's smoke. It's distraction. And he did a lot of it in this. And what I'm going to ask you to do after this is go back and analyze that clip. I will put the link to it in the description box below, and it'll take you straight to the clip. And again, this is not meant to be a criticism of Christy or Mike or what they're doing. They're doing the best that they can with what they were given to them. But you have to analyze all of this deeply enough to know what they're asking and what he's not answering. And he's really good at that. So, hope you enjoyed this video.